There you are. Come and sit by the fire. It burns quietly tonight, steady and warm, as if it has been waiting without keeping count. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breathing slow, without needing to be guided. You don't need to follow this story closely. This forest does not ask for attention. It listens, even when your thoughts drift somewhere gentler. Tonight, I want to tell you about something that rested beneath the roots of Whispergrove. Not lost, not trapped, just waiting, longer than it realized. This is a story about listening to the ground beneath your feet, about patience instead of searching, and about how some paths are not found by moving forward, but by staying still long enough to be invited. I have lived in Whispergrove long enough to know the sound of the forest when it is resting. There is a certain stillness that settles when everything has found its place. Not silence. The forest never truly falls silent, but a gentle balance, where each sound knows exactly how loud it should be, and no louder. That night, the fire burned low and steady beside me. The embers glowed with a patient warmth, and the smoke drifted upward as if it had nowhere urgent to be. I sat with my hands resting loosely on my knees, listening as I often do, letting the forest breathe around me. At first, everything felt as it should. The leaves above me shifted softly. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, then settled again. The ground beneath me felt firm, familiar, shaped by countless footsteps that had passed without ever needing to leave a mark. And yet, something was holding its breath. It was not a feeling of danger, not even of concern. It was subtler than that, like the moment just before sleep when the body grows still but the mind has not yet decided to follow. I leaned forward slightly and rested my palms against the earth. The ground felt softer than usual, not loose, not unstable, simply attentive. I closed my eyes and listened more carefully. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the quiet chorus of the night, layered and slow. But then, beneath it all, so faint I almost mistook it for memory, I felt something else. A sound not carried by the air, but by the ground itself. It was not a call, it was not a voice, it was a rhythm. A small, uneven breath, rising and falling far below my feet, as though something deep beneath the roots was sleeping, but not quite comfortably. I did not move. Some sounds disappear the moment you try to chase them. Instead, I stayed where I was and let my breathing slow until it matched the pace of the forest. Only then did I feel it again, clearer this time. A gentle presence, steady but uncertain, like a thought that had not yet finished forming. I opened my eyes. The fire crackled once, then settled. Fireflies drifted lazily between the trees, their light soft and unhurried. Nothing on the surface of Whispergrove seemed disturbed. And yet, I knew. Something was there. Not above the ground, where most things make themselves known, but below. I rose slowly, taking my staff in hand. I did not feel the need to hurry. Whatever waited beneath the roots had waited long enough already. I followed no path at first, only the subtle pull of that quiet rhythm beneath my feet. Each step I took felt slightly different from the last, as though the ground itself were guiding me, not forward, but inward. The deeper part of Whispergrove is not marked by distance. It is marked by age. The trees grew closer together here, their roots thick and intertwined, pressing against the surface of the earth like folded hands. Moss covered nearly everything, softening stone and soil alike. Pale mushrooms glowed faintly near the base of the trunks, their light barely enough to illuminate the spaces between roots. I stopped when the feeling beneath my feet grew strongest. The ground here felt warm, not with heat, but with presence. I knelt slowly and placed my hand against the earth. The sound came again, that small, uneven breath, closer now, though still impossibly distant. "There you are," I said quietly, more to myself than to whatever lay beneath. The ground did not respond, nor did it retreat. I listened again, letting my thoughts settle. I had heard many things in Whispergrove over the years, lost animals, shifting roots, even the slow movement of stone. But this was different. This sound did not belong to the surface. It belonged to a place beneath it. I stood and looked around carefully, searching for any sign of a passage, a hollow, a gap between roots, a place where the forest might have opened before. There was nothing. The roots here were old, older than paths, older than memory. They lay thick and close, woven together so tightly that even light struggled to slip between them. No tunnel, no opening, no way down. I circled the area slowly, my staff brushing softly against moss and bark. Each place I checked led to the same conclusion. There was no path beneath the roots, not one meant to be walked at least. I stopped and rested both hands on my staff. For a long time I simply stood there. It would have been easy to mistake this for an obstacle, something to be solved or worked around, but Whispergrove has taught me better than that. If there is no path, it is not because one has been hidden. It is because one has not yet been given. I returned to the place where the sound felt closest and sat down slowly, letting myself settle into the earth. I did not try to reach below. I did not press or dig or search. I only stayed. The forest around me grew quieter, not in absence, but in attention. Even the fireflies seemed to slow, their lights hovering rather than drifting. I placed my palm against the ground once more and spoke softly, not to call anything upward, but simply to be heard. "I can hear you," I said. "You don't need to go anywhere." The sound beneath the roots shifted slightly, not away, not closer, just enough to let me know it remained. Whatever lay below was not trapped. It was resting, perhaps for too long. I leaned back and let my voice fall into a gentle rhythm, telling the ground of simple things, of the fire that still burned behind me, of the way the leaves turned silver under moonlight, of the paths that remembered every footstep without ever keeping score. I spoke not to guide, but to remind. The earth beneath my hand felt warmer now, as though listening. Still, the roots did not part, and I understood then that the way down would not be found by moving forward. It would be found by waiting. I remained there for a long while after my words had settled into the ground. The forest did not rush to answer. It never does. Whispergrove prefers to be certain before it moves, and certainty, I have learned, is something that grows only in stillness. My hand rested against the earth, and beneath it I felt the slow, patient rhythm continue. The small breath below the roots did not grow louder, nor did it fade. It simply stayed, as though it had been waiting not for action, but for permission. I adjusted my position slightly and allowed my weight to sink more fully into the ground. The moss beneath me compressed softly, releasing the faint scent of damp earth and old leaves. Above, the trees stood unmoving, their branches forming a canopy that felt less like shelter and more like listening. I spoke again, quietly, my voice low enough that it barely disturbed the air. "There's no hurry," I said. "The night is long, and the forest remembers how to wait." The earth responded this time. Not with sound, but with a subtle shift beneath my palm, a change in pressure almost imperceptible, like the turning of a thought deep within the mind. The roots around me did not move aside, but I sensed them easing, as though they were no longer holding themselves quite so tightly together. I closed my eyes. It is easier to notice small changes when you are not looking for them. The warmth beneath my hand grew more pronounced, spreading outward in a slow, careful way. The ground was not opening, not yet, but it was softening, not in structure, but in intention. I continued to speak, letting my words wander gently, without aim. I spoke of the way morning light filters through leaves, never choosing a single path. I spoke of streams that know exactly where they are going without ever seeming to decide. I spoke of how the forest welcomes every step, even the hesitant ones, because hesitation is simply another form of listening. As I spoke, the rhythm beneath the roots changed. The uneven breath I had felt before grew steadier, more curious than uncertain. Whatever lay beneath the ground was waking, not suddenly, not with alarm, but with the slow awareness of something remembering that it had not always been alone. Then, very gently, the earth shifted. Not apart, downward. The ground beneath my hand lowered by the smallest measure, as though it were exhaling. The roots above it adjusted naturally, sliding against one another without resistance, creating a shallow hollow where there had been none before. I opened my eyes. Before me, where moss and soil had once lain flat, there was now a gentle dip in the earth, not a hole, not a passage, but a place where depth had been allowed to exist. A faint glow pulsed from below. It was not bright, not sharp, just enough to distinguish shape from shadow. I leaned forward slightly, careful not to disturb the space that had been given, and there, nestled in the newly formed hollow beneath the roots, was the little one. It was small, no larger than a curled bundle of leaves, its body round and close to the earth. Soft fur covered it in uneven patches, threaded through with moss and fine strands of root that had grown around it over time, not to trap it, but to keep it warm. Tiny blossoms glowed faintly among the moss on its back, their light the same gentle hue as the mushrooms that grew throughout Whispergrove. A quiet yellow-green, like memory made visible. Its eyes were closed. It was sleeping, not the shallow sleep of fear, nor the deep stillness of exhaustion, but the lingering rest of something that had stayed too long in a place that asked nothing of it. I did not reach out. In this place, touch still comes later. Instead, I shifted my weight and sat a little closer, my presence steady and unhurried. The glow from the creature's back pulsed once, then again, as though responding to the rhythm of my breathing. "I wondered when I might meet you," I said softly. The words did not startle it. They seemed to settle around it instead, like leaves drifting down to rest where they belong. The rootling, for that is what it was, though names are rarely given so clearly, stirred slightly. One small paw moved, brushing against the soil, and the moss along its side shimmered faintly. I waited. Moments passed, perhaps minutes. Time here felt wider than usual, spreading out rather than moving forward. At last, the rootling's eyes opened. They were dark and calm, reflecting the soft light around us without fully capturing it. It did not look afraid, nor did it look surprised. It looked present. Our gazes met, and in that quiet space between us, recognition settled, not as thought, but as feeling. The rootling did not know who I was, and I did not need it to. It was enough that we were both here, awake, listening. I spoke again, gently. "There's a world above the roots," I said. "Not better, just different." The rootling blinked slowly. I told it about the forest floor, about the way leaves shift beneath passing feet, about fireflies that gather where the night grows warm, about mushrooms that glow brightest just before sleep takes hold. As I spoke, the moss along its back loosened slightly, no longer clinging quite so closely. The blossoms brightened, then dimmed again, as if breathing. The roots around us responded, adjusting their positions to create more space, not forcing the rootling upward, but making room for movement, should it choose to make it. When the rootling sat up, it did so without urgency. Soil slipped gently from its fur, falling back into the hollow as though returning to its place. It looked toward the surface, then back at me. I did not gesture. I did not speak. I simply remained. That was all it needed. The rootling rose and took a single tentative step forward. The roots parted just enough to allow it passage, then held, waiting to see if it wished to continue. It did. Slowly, carefully, it climbed upward, emerging from beneath the roots into the open air of Whispergrove. The blossoms along its back glowed more brightly now, responding to the familiar scents and sounds of the forest. I stood as well, offering no guidance beyond my presence. When the rootling reached the surface fully, it paused and took a deep, steady breath. Fireflies drifted closer, their lights flickering softly in greeting. The forest seemed to lean in, not to examine, but to welcome. The hollow beneath the roots eased closed once more, the earth settling back into itself with a quiet sense of completion. The rootling lingered only a moment longer. Then, without ceremony, it turned and padded toward the deeper part of the forest, disappearing among the roots and glowing plants as though it had always been there. I watched until it was gone. The ground beneath my feet felt firm again, not closed, just content. I rested my hand against the earth one last time. "Rest well," I said, though I was not sure whether I spoke to the forest, the roots, or the quiet place beneath them. Then I turned and walked home. That night, Whispergrove rested fully. The fire burned low and steady. The leaves shifted softly overhead. The ground held no unspoken breaths. Some things do not need to be found. They need to be remembered, and sometimes the way forward is not a path at all, but the patience to wait until the earth is ready to open. And so the forest settled once more. The roots lay quietly beneath the soil. The fireflies returned to their slow wandering, and the ground released the breath it had been holding. That is the way of Whispergrove, Nothing is hurried, nothing is forced. What needs to rise will rise in its own time. What needs to rest will be allowed to do so. If your thoughts feel heavy, you may leave them here for a while. The forest does not mind. It knows how to hold things gently. Stay by the fire as long as you wish, or drift into sleep knowing that beneath every path there is a deeper place that remembers you. Good night, my friend.